So my question for you, and then I'll talk about how I'm thinking about this, is all right, if you were in my position and you got to flip a switch is probably too glib because there's a lot of work that goes into this, and go in one direction for both of those services, how would you think about that?
Well, the question you're putting on the table, which is a hard one, is it okay, and let's just take the simple case, for two people to communicate with each other in a way that makes it difficult for any third party to casually listen in? Is that okay? And I think the way we normally answer that question is kind of a form of what you might call status quoism, which is not satisfying. It's whatever has been the case is what should stay the case. And so for WhatsApp, it's like, right now, WhatsApp, as I understand it, you could correct me if I'm wrong, is pretty hard to get into. If Facebook...
It's fully intent encrypted.
Right, so Facebook gets handed a subpoena or a warrant or something from name your favorite country, and you're just like, thank you for playing, we have nothing for you.
Yeah, we've had employees thrown in jail because we have gotten court orders that we have to turn over data that we wouldn't probably anyway, but we can't because it's encrypted.
Yes, and then on the other hand, and this is not as clean as it could be in theory, but Messenger is sometimes encrypted, sometimes not. If it doesn't happen to have been encrypted by the users, then that subpoena could work. And more than that, there could start to be some automated systems, either on Facebook's own initiative or under pressure from governments in the general case, not a specific warrant, to say, hey, if the following phrases appear, if there's some telltale that says this is somebody going after a kid for exploitation, it should be forwarded up. If that's already happening and we can produce X number of people who have been identified and a number of crimes averted that way, who wants to be the person to be like, lock it down? Like, we don't want any more of that. But I guess to put myself now to your question, when I look out over years rather than just weeks or months, the ability to casually peek at any conversation going on between two people or among a small group of people, or even to have a machine do it for you. So you can just set your alert list, crudely speaking, and get stuff back. That, it's always trite to call something Orwellian, but it makes Orwell look like a piker. Artificial intelligence is one label for it, but another label for it is just forms of systems that evolve under their own rules in ways that might be unexpected even to the creator of those systems, that will be used in some way to substitute for human agency in a lot of instances. And that substitution for human agency might be something that is quite autonomy enhancing for humans individually or in groups. If you have a system that can worry about stuff that you don't have to worry about anymore, you can turn your attention to other, possibly more interesting or important issues. On the other hand, if you're consigning to a system agenda-setting power, decision-making power, again, either individually or in a group, that may really carry with it consequences, and people aren't so much keeping an eye on. I want to think more broadly about the future of cyber state and think about accumulations of power, both centralized and distributed, that might require transparency and boundaries we wouldn't be used to. Anything ranging from Google Glass or whatever its successors might be, so that we could find ourselves live streaming out of this room at all times and have that telemetry automatically categorized as to with whom we're having conversations. And imagine even the state then turning around and saying, in the event of something like the Boston Marathon bombing or in Paris, anybody near this event is going to have telemetry that we will now request from patriots or demand from those who are a little chary, and see just how much data can be accumulated from a peer-to-peer kind of perspective. But I think it won't just be the state getting assisted from it, it'll be challenged too. This is an app called Suki, in which demonstrators can put into the app where the police are as they're demonstrating, and the app will then show you the still open exits to wherever you are that the police haven't gotten around to closing off yet. And that's the kind of thing that worries the authorities. But there's a third dimension too, and that is, how are these folks deciding to convene for a protest? It might be through something like Facebook or Twitter or other social media. In this wonderful example, Facebook was able in the 2010 US congressional elections to get more people to vote by putting notifications in their news feeds of where the polling places were. Now, they could do it selectively, and they've got a lot of data by which to do that. Here's Facebook able to predict when two Facebook users are about to enter into a romantic relationship before either of the people apparently knows. And you could imagine Facebook, hypothetically, tweaking the feeds to encourage the people to come together by showing their good sides, or maybe if they don't belong together, pushing them apart, and they shall never be.
Ultimately, I'd push a model, and the word is not the best word, but fiduciary, a fiduciary model, and it's a word that basically means a duty of loyalty and care to put the interests of the person that you're in privity with and whom you're learning a ton about, and you're filling their news feed with news that might excite them or depress them, to do that in a way that puts their interests ahead of yours. And it may be hard to know when you're doing it. It's easier to know when you're not doing it. And if you're doing something that's designed only to elicit the people on Facebook that might vote the way that Mark Zuckerberg wants them to vote, hypothetically speaking, and only alerting, say, those folks that it's election day, and for the others you show them the picture of the cat, that's not being a good fiduciary. And I think if we introduce that concept, it may be a way to start thinking across the board, not just for academics, but for everybody in a position of power, running a platform, handling this data stream, thinking about how it's serving the person you're working with. And this is now to answer your question originally, Vish, about what's different. What's different is the prospect of what we loosely call AI, and I mean it in the narrow sense, not the general AI sense of Her or HAL 9000. But I mean in the narrow sense of an AI that can exquisitely find out when somebody is feeling really down. And a fiduciary would say, all right, you're feeling down, first you should be aware of that. Just so you know, we've noticed this is not your baseline. And you might not notice that too because you're in a fog, and here are some options. That's meant to look out for the person that you've become aware of how they're feeling. If instead you're like, this is the perfect time for a payday loan. We're just going to send you an ad right now to unload, at 9% interest, and no one else will see it. This is a special offer just for you. Ralph Nader isn't there to, vindicate your interests, or the Attorney General. That's not being a good fiduciary.
From a straight jobs perspective, technology itself refers to, from its root, technique, some practice that can be repeated and made so routine as to no longer require the judgment of a human to do. And we've come up with a lot of good techniques over the years that we then reify into an object that can do it. And when that happens, it calls to mind for me Isaac Asimov's quote that says, "Any job that a robot can perform is beneath the dignity of a human to do." Now, I'm not sure I agree with Isaac Asimov. There's plenty of stuff I still choose to do, like perhaps bake some bread. Now, maybe it pops out of a can at first, and I just put it in the oven. I should say prepare some bread. But even that is something now that could be done through technique and technology, but there might be some reason to do it. But to find myself having to earn my livelihood doing it and finding the result artisanally, it may turn out no better than what the technology can do, that does strike me as the kind of job that, of course, technology is designed to displace. And I wouldn't begrudge the person who's been relying on that job anxiety about losing it. But it confronts us not with the question of how do we keep the technology in the bottle, but how do we make sure that what the technology does is actually meaningfully of the same quality as what came before, and that the person who might be displaced has a set of things that he or she can do to still find meaningful work.